Welcome to the Built for Growth podcast. I'm doing things a little bit different again today. If you've been listening to my last few episodes, you probably have noticed I've been on the road. So I'm here in the beautiful home of my guest today, Jordan Syatt, who is a fitness coach, a personal trainer, and entrepreneur. And I think he's really well known for his work in the nutritional space and his really no nonsense approach, which I just loved our conversation today because we got into a myriad of things. We left off the very end of the podcast as GLP-1s, and that was just a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed that, and just so much about moving through food traumas. We both kind of have an experience there growing up in wrestling and just having to deprive, and how do we actually get meaningful, lasting change and goals in our life? Whatever your fitness goal is, I think that you are going to benefit from listening to this conversation today. So again, as always, thank you so much for listening. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for having me today. This is so cool to be here in your home, in your studio. And we just recorded an amazing podcast. So I feel like we're just going to roll on the heels of that.
I'm stoked. I told you from when we first started interacting on social media, I've been a huge fan of yours for many, many years. And to have you on my podcast was a blessing. And then to be here on yours is amazing. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. I liked how when we were talking on Instagram, we were kind of voice noting back and forth as I was coming here, and I was telling you, I kind of want to talk a little bit about women and sports and, hormones and just kind of and you're like, okay, that's great. And you're like, just a heads up though, we might not agree on everything. And I was like, that's actually great. That's what I want. There's, I think people need to know that it's okay to have conversations with people that you don't see eye to eye on everything. And that's just so important. Yeah.
You and I both said it's okay to disagree. And as I said, it's one of my favorite things about the long form podcast context is that you can have a nuanced discussion, whereas so much of the rage bait on short form content is just based on, let's pick out this one thing that I think we disagree on and just slam you for it. It's I bet if we sat down and had a face-to-face conversation, we'd probably agree on 98% and have a very civil discussion on the 2% we disagree on.
I think that's exactly how it was. So it was a phenomenal episode. But let's dive into your backstory a little bit. How did you become so involved in the fitness world?
Yeah. So it started, as you can tell, I'm a short, bald Jewish guy. And so my mom wanted to prevent my brother and I from being picked on. So she put us in wrestling when we were 8 years old. And I remember I was on the living room couch and she walks in and she was like, I'm going to put you two in wrestling. And and I didn't know what wrestling was other than The Rock and WWE. So I remember I looked at her and I was like, you want me to hit someone with a chair? And she's like, no, you idiot, just Olympic style wrestling. And I was like, I don't know what that is. But she put me in wrestling, my brother and I immediately fell in love with it. And as I told you on my show, I was horrible in school. I was in special education, but I was very athletic. And so I wasn't good in school. Everyone else in my family is great academically.
What does that even mean exactly? I mean, you glossed over that in your podcast and I was like, did I hear right? But you're such an intelligent man. Why do you think you were in special education?
So I've spoken about it a fair bit to my audience, but I think a lot of it had to do with just the way the school system is structured. It's just the way that I learned didn't fit their memorization of all of these dates and times and didn't fit that. And so they put me in special ed, or they called it SPED. And it was the worst because there's nothing worse than being in a class and then having the SPED teacher come in and be like, all right, SPED students, come to this room. You have to take a test in a separate room. And I'd always pretend that I wasn't. So I would pretend I didn't hear, and they'd be like, Jordan, you're in SPED. Come on. I'd be like, fuck. So I just wasn't good in the school system that we have. But I really loved sports. I loved soccer and baseball and wrestling, and wrestling was my main thing. So I did that from 8 to 18. By the time I got to high school, most kids who wrestle, they start in high school, or at least they did back then. Now kids are starting wrestling really, really young. So I had a fair amount of experience before. So I beat a junior out for the varsity spot freshman year. I had to cut a lot of weight. I was cutting from 112 to 103, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I was just starving myself and doing really stupid stuff. But when you're a freshman going up against mainly juniors and seniors, there's a pretty large strength differential. And so I was like, I need to get stronger. I don't know how. So I just Googled I specifically Googled kettlebell gym near me because I had really gotten into Pavel Tsatsouline and kettlebell training. I thought that that was the key. And I found a facility a couple towns over from me that really specialized in science-based lifting and a lot of kettlebells. And I was fortunate because they took me under their wing and they let me intern with them for when I was 14 years old. And so I trained there all through high school and I got stronger and I fell in love with coaching. And it's really the only job I ever had. And so I just thought one day I would open up a gym and coach people, but I ended up getting really into powerlifting, and so I started powerlifting. I got the opportunity to train at Westside Barbell with Louis Simmons, and then a man named Eric Cressy at Cressy Sports Performance, and I had some really wonderful mentors. And when I was competing in powerlifting and training at Westside, I started a website, and this was in 2011, and so I was just posting my training on YouTube and writing articles. And for the first 2 years, I had like 20 views a day on my website. 18 of those were my mom. And by the time I graduated college, because I started the website when I was in college, I had enough clients online where I could just do online coaching. And so I didn't start it thinking I was getting online clients. I was just writing articles about what my training and nutrition looked like. And one day a woman from Brazil reached out and she said, "How much do you charge for online coaching?" I was like, "I don't know, $300. I have no idea." And she was like, "Cool, how do I pay you?" I was like, "That's crazy." So I spent like 48 hours at my university. There was a coffee shop called Brouhaha. I went to University of Delaware. Spent like 48 hours designing this has to be the best program ever, and sent it to her. I thought she was going to be like, this is all I get. And she did it and she loved it. And she was my first online client. And so I graduated college and I hadn't told anyone what I was doing. So I remember my mom was like, "All right, you need to get a job now." And I was like, "I think I'm good." And she was like, "What the fuck?" She's a lawyer. She's like very hard work. And she was like, "What do you mean you're good?" I was like, "Well, I'm coaching people online." And people didn't know what that was in 2013, 14. And then I just kept doing that. And I started posting on social media and like on Instagram and all that in like 2014, 2015. And I've been doing it ever since. That's what I do.
You feel like it has evolved in the way that you began coaching people and the way that you coach people now?
A lot, dramatically. So when I first got into, I'll start when I was 14, 15. When I was 14, 15, I had the mindset of a 14, 15-year-old in that, number one, I thought people would only work out to either get better at sports like wrestling or to look good naked. And I remember the first client that I ever worked with at this gym, like one-on-one client, his name was Fred. He was 68 years old. And I asked him, like, "What are your goals?" And his only goal is he just wanted to pick up his grandkids without worrying about his shoulders because he had rotator cuff issues. And that was a big moment for me, realizing like, oh, not everyone cares about how they look. Not everyone wants to be an elite athlete. And that's when I knew I loved coaching, because I was more excited about helping Fred get to his goals than I was about necessarily my goals. And I feel like a lot of coaches nowadays, they want to become a coach because they think it's easy or because they like spending time in the gym. It's like it's very different to spend time in the gym than it is to coach people. So early on, it was just about trying to lose fat and look good naked, and that's it. And then from there, it went to powerlifting, and I was like, everyone wants to be a powerlifter. Everyone wants to get as strong as possible, deadlift hundreds and hundreds of pounds. And I thought that I was only going to work with big, hairy, juiced out dudes who wanted to set world records. And when I was competing in powerlifting, I'm small. So I competed at 132, and my claim to fame was deadlifting 4 times my body weight. So I deadlifted 530 at 132. And this was in the 2011, 12, 13, 14 timeframe when strength training for women really started to pick up. And so I had a lot of women reaching out because they were like, "Hey, I see you're really strong, but you're not big and bulky." And I was like, that's sort of a two-faced, that's like a backhanded compliment. I was like sort of upset about it, but they're like, "I want to get strong, but I don't want to be big, and you're doing that." And I was like, okay. So I started coaching a lot of women in powerlifting, getting stronger. And then over time, it really became more of a holistic approach of, yes, we can get strong, but I also want you to have good cardio. I want you to have good mobility. I want you to not make fitness your entire life. Basically, I want you to get healthier and fit without making health and fitness your entire life. Like your life should fit into health and fitness, not the other way around. And so, and especially from my wrestling background, I developed a lot of eating disorder issues and binge eating. And I wanted to help people develop healthier relationships with food and their body in a way that isn't obsessive. And so it's sort of transformed into a more lifestyle holistic approach as opposed to let's just be obsessed with this one thing and this is the only thing you're going to be you're going to do. Like I want you to have time for your family, for your friends, for getting out in nature, for fulfilling your soul as opposed to just doing this one very vain thing.
What do you think one of the biggest points of contention you have with the diet culture in general, especially something that you still see happening these days? Is there like one thing that kind of sticks out that you see people, or like maybe people coming to you being like, hey, I've tried this and it doesn't work? Is there like a common theme or something that you kind of wish maybe more people knew that like, hey, that isn't the approach, or it's not maybe the best approach that you found in your experiences? Any major bones to pick?
I have so many bones to pick. I have a lot of bones to pick, but the truth is there's no one size fits all approach. So I think one of my biggest gripes is when people are like, this is the diet you need to follow. Like you can't eat carbs or you can't eat this, or like good food, bad food mentality. I've never seen that work long term. I've seen it work short term. I've seen people lose a lot of weight very quickly, cutting out carbs or cutting out this, but inevitably at a certain point, they're going to want to have their favorite foods. Inevitably, they're going to want to have something that is quote unquote off plan. And when you tell them XYZ food is bad, you can never have this food, well, then they're going to feel like a failure when they do have that food. And so for me, it's everything is okay in moderation, and taking away guilt associated with whatever that is. And even, for example, even the people who are like the most hardcore carnivore or the most hardcore whatever, they're all coming out being like, yeah, I stopped doing carnivore now. And now I have some of my favorite foods in moderation. Now I have this. It's like, okay, so for years you were pushing, I'm all carnivore. You can only eat meat. You can only eat meat. But now you're saying, okay, well, you can also have this. You can also have this. So they're all coming back to the everything in moderation, which is, that's my biggest thing. Is like, I want you to enjoy the foods you like. It's one of the reasons I don't do meal plans. No one can stick to a meal plan forever. But if I say like, you can only eat X, Y, or Z, well, what if, number one, different cultures, never mind just like across the world, but within the United States where you live, you're going to have different foods available to you versus other areas of the United States. Never mind, if I have a client in Singapore, the foods that we have available here might not be available there. Things are different. And so I want to be able to tell you generally how much you should be eating, how much energy you should be having, with variances based on how you're feeling, with variances based on your hunger, with variances based on your activity level. But generally, here's how much, and I want you to fill it with mostly whole, nutritious, minimally processed foods, but then also fit in some of your favorite, quote unquote, bad foods, guilt-free. And that is typically the most sustainable method over the long term.
How do you find people are about reframing that mentality around food? Because I think what you said is really important about not being too extreme. I think that diets, I'm using air quotes, don't typically work because there's such a big change from what this person is used to doing and living their life. And usually when something is such a big change, it's hard to, that's not the way you're used to living. It's hard to sustain that for the rest of your life. I mean, if you are on a diet and you're not really happy with it, you're probably not going to do that for the rest of your life. So my kind of thought process is like, let's pick something that you feel like you could do for the rest of your life, and basically eat according to that. So like I do like an animal-based diet primarily. And I've always been very weary of anything that's very extreme, including carnivore. Although I think maybe in carnivore for like a month or like 2 or something to like reset, like maybe there's some benefit in that. But I think long term, just eating meat or just eating, like, I'm not even like vegan. I know, sorry, Mitch, you're just over there. I'm like, like being extreme in anything, like, or cutting out any certain food group, granted it doesn't make you feel ill, isn't probably the best way. It's a way, but I think having balance in all of it and finding sustainable. But do you ever find like the mental resistance in that? Like, are people like, or do you find that they're like, oh, this is refreshing?
I mean, here's what I think. I think generally speaking, if you tell someone they're not allowed to do something, they're going to say, fuck you. Like just basic human psychology. You're not allowed to do that. Like, fuck you. I'm an adult. I'm going to do what I want. And I would actually do this with clients who very difficult clients. They'd be like, I don't like vegetables. And I would be like, cool, I don't want you to eat vegetables. And as soon as like I say that, all of a sudden, like, well, I could have some. I'm cool with broccoli as long as I grill it. Like, and I'll be
A parent 101 strategy.
literally, I'll be like, I had one client, her name was Dawn, and she came in and I had been forewarned from people being like, I've worked with her, nothing works, da 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 da. And instead of me being like, you have to eat them, this is it, I was like, I don't want you to eat vegetables. And then immediately she's like, well, I could have broccoli. And I was like, no, I don't want you to have broccoli. Don't eat broccoli. And then she starts eating broccoli because I told her not to. And this isn't everybody, but generally speaking, if you tell someone you're not allowed to have a certain food, that's all they're, don't think of a white elephant. All of a sudden think of a white elephant. If you say this food is off limits, that's all they're going to be thinking about is having that food. So when you institute these huge sweeping changes that completely alter someone's lifestyle, there are always outliers who will be able to do it. But when you examine those outliers' lives as a whole, typically they're not a life that you want to model. When it's someone who is so extreme, that's their entire life, that's their entire personality. I'm always amused by the people who put the diet they follow in their Instagram bio. Like, it's such an important part of your identity that you have to tell us in your Instagram bio that you're keto, that you're carnivore, that you're vegan. Like, that's such a huge part of you. And we see this with the nutrition world. We see it with strength training as well, but not as much. Like, some people will be like, I'm only kettlebells or I'm only Olympic lifting. But the nutrition world is very cult-like. And they get almost religious with it. It's like their diet is their religion. And if you don't subscribe to what I believe nutritionally, then you are an apostate. It's very odd. But if we look at large-scale data, not individual outliers, the diets that are the most sustainable and the most successful over the long term are the ones that have more moderation. And we can even look at the longest living populations in the world, whether it's the Okinawans, they're actually the longest living in the world. And this is the one example I always use for people who are like, carbs are bad. I'm like, Okinawans eat white rice multiple times a day. And they are the healthiest, longest living population in the world. If you look at the French, another very long living population in the world, they have a lot of carbohydrates in their diet. And actually, not only just carbs, but high sugar carbs and often higher fat carbs, whether it's croissants, whatever. What's the difference? Portion control. They're not eating like we go to Dunkin' Donuts and the muffins are the size of a fucking beanbag chair. Whereas you go to France, all of a sudden you're like, oh, the croissant is like the size of my palm. And they'll have one and they'll move on. Or you go to Italy, another very long living population. You get a serving size of pasta there. It's not a fucking lunch tray size of pasta. It's a much smaller portion, which then comes back to calories once again. So you should be able to include your favorite foods in moderation, but still focusing mainly and mostly on whole, minimally processed foods, but not feeling guilty for incorporating your favorite ones in moderation.
Okay, now here's a point where it's not exactly that I disagree with you, but I want to pick this apart a little bit. I want to dissect this because portion control for me, like as soon as you say it, is a little anxiety provoking.
Okay.
Because I've had such a toxic relationship with food at times that for me, when I've had to restrict how much I eat of something, then it's like I want to do the opposite. Yep. And also where I struggle sometimes is that the reward centers of the brain. It's like once I have, a donut whole, I want the whole bag. Like immediately it just triggers me. And it is extremely difficult for me to be like, I'm only going to eat this much of this food. Sometimes it's easier for me to be like, you know what? I'm not going to have that food. And I've reframed that. Instead of saying, no, I won't, I will say, I'm going to choose. I'm going to say yes to myself. I'm not going to say no to this. I'm going to say yes to myself. So portion control for me sometimes can be a tricky one because the processed foods do trigger wanting more and they go down easily. And then we have to fight the way that our body, has been basically, it's used, food is kind of weaponized. Sometimes it's weaponized.
Do you ever give in and say, hey, I'm going to have this food?
Yes, absolutely.
And what happens?
Well, as long as I'm not like, okay, I'm only going to have one bite.
Yep.
Okay. Then I find that I feel better about it. But I have been points when I'm like, I overindulge. Yeah. Because I can't stop once I start. Yep. And so I've had to like find my happy medium. And I think sometimes people, when they are like, okay, portion control means I can only have a tiny bit of it, then it can get really difficult. Like, how do you navigate through that?
Yeah. So, what I'll say is, let's say you had way more than you should have. Of what's your thing? Like, what's something that you're like, hey, what kind of cake? Cake.
Like any like a vanilla, which is like buttercream and yeah, buttercream.
Did it ruin your health?
No, but at the worst points it was very complicated because there was like binging and it was just like, and bulimia, like just extremes, where it was just like
out of weight cutting and okay. So that's disordered eating. Correct. And so what I would say is this is another like outlier example of number one, it's just because you can't have it now in moderation doesn't mean you can't in the future. What I would say this is more indicative of, and this is very common in the fight world and weight cutting world, and actually not only in fights, but in any weight controlled sport. We see it with often gymnasts. We see it often even in crew, in the sport with the boat, where they have to keep their weight down in order to go as fast as possible. Jockeys as well, exactly. Severe disordered eating. So my goal would be, I think a very healthy goal would be to learn how to enjoy these foods in moderation. Now, moderation doesn't mean one bite. Moderation might be one slice. My issue is that many people will say, I can't ever have this food, out of a fear of thinking, if I have this, well, this is unhealthy. And my thing is, listen, no one ever got healthy from eating one salad. No one ever got fat or unhealthy from having one slice of cake. It's what you do over. No one ever got great at fighting from one training session in the gym, right? I guarantee you'd probably say, listen, if you want to be a great fighter or a great athlete, you've got to train very consistently. But I'm sure there have been times where you might have taken a week off. You're like, hey, I'm going to take a week off fighting. I'm going to take a week off of training, just do what I need. It didn't make or break your career. You just took a week off. If someone, God forbid, has a cake, a slice or 2 slices of cake, oh my gosh, you didn't ruin your health. The issue is what happens next. Does that turn into a all-out binge? In which case I would say that's a sign that there's something that we need to work on that is not because of the cake. It's what's in between your ears. You have an issue with your relationship with food, which again is very common, which I struggled with it from wrestling and weight cutting for that. And many fighters and weight-controlled athletes do struggle with that. I would say the issue isn't the cake. The issue is your perception of the cake, and we need to make it so that you can enjoy one slice and be okay with that. And that process would take a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of work, but I don't think that I think it's more detrimental to say that this is bad than it is to say I can have this in moderation. I think one of the documentaries that did the most harm to people's relationship with food is Super Size Me. Super Size Me is shown to high schoolers and middle schoolers, at least all over the U.S., if not the world. And number one, I have so many issues with that documentary. Even the title, Super Size Me. It's like he had to say yes if they asked to supersize his meal. He could say no. You're not required to say yes if they asked to supersize the meal. You could be like, no, I'm going to stay with this. He also, in the documentary, in the first couple of days, if you watch it, he ate so much that he ended up throwing up. And he was like, see how bad this is for you? It's like, well, how about you stop eating before you fucking get sick? You aren't forced to eat to the point of so much discomfort and nausea that you throw up. A lot of that was manipulated, and even came out afterwards that a lot of it was manipulated. But the idea that there are good and bad foods is an inherently damaging train of thought and mentality around food. Now, there's no question some foods are more or less nutritious, for sure, and the majority of your diet should be based around nutritious foods that fuel you well. But I think it is, in the same way that it's really bad and unhealthy to have the majority of your diet be highly processed, highly palatable foods, I think it's equally damaging to say that I can never enjoy anything in moderation. If it's my daughter's birthday and I'm so scared of getting fat that I can't have a slice of pizza with my daughter, I think that's unhealthy. That is a disordered relationship with food that can have severe negative health consequences.
I love what you said. And I also think that moderation cannot just be the portion size and that time. It could also be how often are you doing it? Yes, 100%. Right? Like, is this like something you're doing morning, noon, and night, and you're having a small, and then you're battling? Or is it something that's like, you know what? I'm going to be really excited for that on Friday because it's my kid's birthday, or you're looking forward to it. Sometimes the moderation can be like how often you're eating those kinds of food, right? I know something that worked for me in trying to just heal myself a little bit was like coming up with a mantra and just reframing the anxiety because it was almost like the anxiety I realized was stemming from the idea that I might not have it in the future, right? That there may be a time or a long time where I have to deprive myself. And that was kind of what was going on, the psychological warfare, which would make me want to overconsume it while it was there, right? So like if I would like walk into my pantry and all of a sudden it would be like a trigger for me. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I just want to like eat all this food, which I know I mentioned on your podcast, but I had experienced like an amenorrheic state a couple of times just by having severe calorie restrictions and trying to make a weight. Especially when I dropped down to 125 pounds, which normally my whole career I fought at 135. And when I made 125, that was just, it was bad. It was not good for me. Yeah. It was bad for my health. And I would just get to these points where I was just ravenous. I mean, clearly now looking back, I was so calorically deprived that my body was just wanted to survive so badly that I just wanted to consume everything. And then this war begins of like what I can't do and what I can do. And so when I was no longer, needing to make that weight and I was out of the camp, I was constantly wanting to overconsume. My body was still scared and my mentality was still scared of this like scarcity mindset. Like I'm not going to have it again, or it's going to be deprived, or there will come a time when I'm not able to do this. So I need to eat as much as I can now. And so what I started doing is coming up with this powerful mantra, just saying like, I am safe. And for me, I would walk in, I would take a deep breath. And I would say, like, I'm safe. If I want this food right now, I can have it. And I can also choose to have it tomorrow. Or I can also choose to just like wait a few days. It's not going anywhere. And I have the freedom and choice to do that. And I can do it. And if I'm going to have it now, then I'm going to choose to let it be guilt-free.
Did you come up with that mantra yourself?
I did.
That is a common tactic and tool that's used in binge eating recovery. And oftentimes it's one of the tools I'll use when people feel like I'm struggling with binge eating. I have something called the 20-minute rule, where I'll say, if you feel a binge coming on, because you'll feel it, like you can start, and oftentimes it's at night. It's like you're about to go to bed or things are getting a little bit late and you're not even really hungry, but you're like, I'm going to eat this whole fucking pantry. I'm going to eat everything in here. And as you're doing it, you feel guilty, you feel gross, you don't want it, you'll eat to a point of discomfort. And this 20-minute rule is, I say, you're allowed to binge. Just put 20 minutes on the clock and wait 20 minutes. If at the end of 20 minutes, go binge. Have the craziest binge you've ever had in your life. But if at the end of 20 minutes, you don't want to binge anymore, then eat whatever you'd like or handle it however you'd like, but you don't have to. Just giving people this space between impulse and action is often enough to, at the very least, reduce the frequency of these binges. And if someone's binging 4 or 5 nights a week and you take them down to 1 night a week, well, now you just went from like 20 binges a month to 4 binges a month, which is dramatic for your health, physical health, mental health, emotional health. And so what you've done by saying like, I'm safe, I can either have it now or I can have it tomorrow, or I'm allowed to have it, you've given yourself permission, which is what I'm giving people permission. And again, it's that if I'm not allowed to, you're going to want it. It's going to be going off in your head. It's that fire alarm they just want to pull every time you pass it. When you give people the permission, especially with someone who's struggling with binge eating, now all of a sudden, oh, okay, it's not a big deal. It's still going to be here tomorrow. And what weight-controlled athletes, they have this learned response. There's going to be a time where I'm not allowed to have that. During this weight cut, I'm not going to be allowed to have this food because that's not on my meal plan. That's not in my program. That's not going to help me weigh this amount on this day that I need to. So it's a learned habit and response that now you have to get rid of because you're no longer doing it anymore. And my hope for the fight world and the weight controlled sport world is, number one, smarter weight cuts. Also, less drastic weight cuts. I want my daughters to wrestle and do jiu-jitsu. I don't care if they compete, but they have to learn in some capacity. But if they decide to compete, they're not going to be allowed to cut weight. I don't care. It's not worth the potential negative downfalls of a horrible relationship with food that we see among both men and women in these fight sports and weight-controlled sports. So I want you to get good technique-wise. I want you to get good mentally and emotionally, have the confidence from it, the skill of it. But there's no reason for someone to be cutting weight, especially if they really care about their health. It's not healthy, and you can't argue otherwise.
Yeah. I think it's really powerful. And I think for me, I just had a deep dive of like why I was feeling that way and what I felt like was very unsafe. I just felt unsafe. And so that mantra came to me naturally as like I wanted to feel safe. And I also wanted to be able to say yes to myself. I didn't want to say no anymore. And then just alleviating that allowed me to, again, sort of kind of flip the whole concept of what I was fighting about upside down. flip it on its head and be like, ah, that's not actually a thing. It doesn't need to be a thing. Like I can have this if I want to.
Yeah.
And then sometimes just having it.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes just having it. Yeah.
Right. And not feeling guilty about it. It's if you can have it and have that be it, and then go on with the rest of your day or the rest of your week, and not go into the issue is often people on like Friday night, they've been quote unquote good Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And by good, I mean starving themselves, severely restricting themselves. Friday comes along, all of a sudden they feel like, well, I've been so good and I'm so deprived. Well, now I'm going to go nuts. Friday night, they go crazy. Saturday, they feel like shit. They feel guilty. They feel like a failure. So whatever, I'll just get back on track on Monday. And by the time before Monday comes, they're like, well, Monday is when I start starving myself again. So that means weekend's going to be crazy time because I know I'm not going to be allowed to eat these foods for the rest of the week. So Saturday and Sunday is eating as much as they possibly can of these quote unquote bad foods. Meanwhile, it's not the food in and of itself. It's your relationship with it. It's that you've told yourself it's bad. You've told yourself it's off limits. You know you're not going to allow yourself to have it. What if on Tuesday, God forbid, you had 2 slices of pizza at work? No one ruined their diet from 2 slices of pizza. It's that those 2 slices then turned into 2 whole fucking pizzas. Then when you got back home, you had a whole box of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, delicious by the way, and you had no control. That's the issue. It's not the food. It's your relationship with it that needs to be improved.
What does your diet typically look like, and how have you navigated that? I mean, when I hear you talking, it almost sounds like you're a counselor in a way. Right? It does. I mean, it's kind of funny because it's like you don't necessarily think of that from someone who's helping with health and fitness goals because it's not traditionally what we see. But I think that's why you're so powerful in this field, because a lot of what we're trying to do and accomplish those goals can affect us mentally, which ultimately the body follows the mind. And if the mind is broken or unhealthy, it just makes it that much harder to get to where we want to go. So let's be totally transparent. I saw you were drinking a Diet Coke earlier. Yep. Okay. And like, how do you consider your moderation? I know everybody's journey is different, but I'm curious.
So I'm going to give you my general outline for my nutrition. First, I'll explain the counselor concept. So as I said, I got into the coaching world when I was like 14, 15. By the time I got to college, I initially went in for exercise science. By about October, November of my first semester, I was like, I need to get out of this, because when I was in exercise science, I was learning from professors who had never actually coached anybody. They were in school to learn exercise science, and there was sports nutrition and nutrition classes as well. But even the nutrition professors, the exercise science professors, they had just learned in school and then became professors. They had never actually coached anybody. And because I did 4 years in high school coaching at this gym. Then I took a year off between high school and college. I lived in Israel for a year. I coached people there. And then I came back, went to school, and I had spent 5 years coaching people. And I realized you could have the perfect workout plan, the perfect nutrition plan, but if someone's not following it, it doesn't matter. And I was like, there's something going on behaviorally and psychologically that is preventing people from making the right choices. Everybody knows apple, donut, which one is more nutritious. Everybody. But if you go to 100 people and say, hey, I've got an apple or a donut, and let's say all 100 people want to lose weight. They all want to lose weight, and they know which one's going to be better for them. They're not all going to choose the apple. Same thing, even now, like everyone knows cigarettes are going to give you cancer. On the box, there's a skull and crossbones, and it says these things are going to give you cancer if you smoke these. And never mind people who are already addicted to it, but someone right now is going to buy their first box of cigarettes with the fucking skull and crossbones on it. It says this is going to kill you. So it's not just a knowledge gap. There's a behavioral and psychological and emotional gap that people aren't making the decisions that are right for them. So I switched to behavioral health psychology is what I switched my study to, which was probably one of the best decisions I made in terms of my education, because it helped me understand why people are making the decisions they're making, why their behavior isn't matching what they want it to be, and then trying to help, okay, well, where can we meet them so I can design the best programs, but also understanding a more realistic approach to actually help them stick to that program. As for my nutrition, it's mostly a Mediterranean diet. So a lot of salmon, a lot of fiber. So high protein, high fiber, a fair amount of carbohydrates, usually more whole grain based, and a fair amount of fat, but very focused fat. So a lot of like higher fat fish, nuts and seeds, a ton of olive oil. I put olive oil on everything. A ton of fruit, berries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, tons every day. The majority of protein or meat, I would say, is salmon. I have red meat maybe, I don't know, once every 7 to 14 days. I'm not a huge steak guy. I love it. It's delicious, but that's not the majority of where my protein's coming from. I mean, the research is relatively clear that salmon typically is like the king of all kings when it comes to high quality fats and high quality protein at the same time. And my wife makes an amazing salmon. We'll grill it or put it in the air fryer. So a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables, a lot of protein, a lot of fiber, and moderate amount of carbs and fats. I do have Diet Coke. I have a fair amount of coffee as well, up to about 400 milligrams of caffeine a day. That's pretty much it. Oh, and then we have ice cream almost every night for dessert. It's one of my favorite parts of the day. My wife and I will sit down on the couch. We'll have ice cream, and I do that before I work out because I usually work out at night. So we'll sit down, we'll have ice cream, sit down, talk, ask how the day was, maybe watch a show or something, and then I'll go work out. And that's pretty much. And because I work out at night because I have 2 young girls, and God willing, we'll have another one soon. And my workouts are typically between 10 and midnight. So then after my workout, I'll go and eat because I'm fucking hungry. I just worked out, and so then my sleep is the worst part of my health right now. My sleep is really, really bad. It's on a good night, it's about 6 hours, and that's not a brag. It's actually something I'm actively trying to work on, which is a major weak point for me. It's not healthy. It's really important to get good sleep, and I am the worst offender of getting terrible sleep on a regular basis, partly because the kids, but mostly it's my own issues where I'll be scrolling, or I'm mainly right now playing chess on my phone way too much. I just get addicted to it. And then if I lose, I need to play until I win, and that'll go way too long. And so it's a big problem. But yeah, other people. Okay. And we're just talking shit. And and then I know I'm playing like a 14-year-old in Zimbabwe, and they're beating my ass. I'm like, I've got to win. I've got to play until I win.
Sounds like some me time. I mean, there's a little value in that too. But yeah, man, sleep is one of my absolute must-haves. I feel like sleep for me is I like to have good sleep.
You have to. And it's such an integral part of good health. And it's the one area that I'm severely lacking in right now.
Happens to the best of us. I think sometimes I don't, but people don't like me very much when I don't sleep well. So I think it's also a requirement in my family that I sleep well.
I can put it on. Even if I'm deprived, I can put it on.
That's so good. What about like, oh yeah, you said you have ice cream about every night. Did you find that when you were studying in school, was there like, or was there a moment, I guess, for you where you were like, I'm going to apply this to myself? Or like, how did you start to shift your relationship with food? Did you kind of remove that barrier as well?
Yeah. So again, I struggled severely with binge eating as a result of wrestling. And I remember when I started wrestling at 8 years old, my mom, she didn't know anything about wrestling. She just didn't want us to get picked on. So she put us in wrestling, and my brother got to high school first. He's about 3 years older than me. And so he started wrestling on the high school team, and he starts coming home talking about kids are sucking weight by like sucking on ice cubes in order to not eat. And he starts telling about what all these kids are doing for cutting weight. And my mom looks at me. She knows because I'm obsessed with wrestling. My brother wasn't as into it, but he still did it. And she knew that that was my personality, that I would have done whatever in order to make weight. And she was like, promise me you're never going to do that. And at this point, I remember I'm eating General Tso's chicken as we're having this conversation. I was like, I would never do that, Mom. And then when you make varsity and the whole team is depending on you, you're going to do anything. And so I start going down a horrible, horrible rabbit hole of legitimate starving myself, just way over exercising. And then I was like, all right, I don't want to cut weight anymore. Great. Now I go into powerlifting. And powerlifting is, you don't have a whole season. It's sort of like it never stops. But you have a competition. You're probably not going to compete for 4 to 6 months or so at a higher level. So I would like spend about 6 to 12 weeks seriously cutting weight. Then I would binge, regain all the weight, and then I'd have to repeat that as I competed in powerlifting. So anyway, now I'm in college, and I didn't realize that my eating was a problem because so many of the other wrestlers had the same problem. We would all binge eat together, and it was just like, this is what we do. And let's go to Friendly's and eat an entire ice cream cake to myself after a competition. And then we're all going to starve ourselves for the next week as we wait for the next competition. And it was just like what we did. And when people said that's not healthy, I'd be like, you don't get it, right? And then when I got to college, all of a sudden I was having a lot of anxiety around food. And one of the telltale signs of someone who's binge eating is they won't binge in front of other people. they'll like take their food and do it privately. So I would go to the dining hall and like pack food in Tupperware and then bring it back to my dorm and do it by myself. And I was like, this is a problem. And I realized on my own, thank God, I was like, I have a real issue. And I would tell myself over and over again, all right, no more binges, no more binges. But the issue is that after every binge, I would then starve myself, and which then it's a cycle. And I always thought that the cycle started with the binge, but the cycle actually started with starving myself the following day, which was essentially guilting myself and punishing myself for that binge. So I remember on college break, freshman year, I go back to my mom's apartment in Boston, and I was binging when she would go to sleep. And I was just so tired of it. It's so exhausting. I hate myself for it. And I went in the bathroom and I looked myself in the mirror, and I had a talk with myself. I was like, starting tomorrow, number one, I'm not going to binge, but most importantly, I'm going to have a huge breakfast. And that was big for me because usually the morning after a binge, I wouldn't eat. I would like try and starve myself the rest of the day to try and make up for the quote unquote damage. I remember I forced myself to eat a breakfast. I actually took a picture of that breakfast and put it on my personal Facebook page. It was 2011 or something. I was like, I'm having breakfast today. It was a big deal. I didn't tell anyone I was struggling with binge eating, but I was like, there's my breakfast. Just like this is what I'm doing. And I haven't binged since I had that one big breakfast that was now like 15 years ago. But I had to stop over restricting myself after a binge. It was that constant restriction, that binge restrict cycle that led me to keep doing it. And once I forced myself to stop restricting is when I was finally able to develop a healthier relationship with food.
That's so interesting. I would say mine parallels or mirrors yours pretty closely. I remember swearing off, at least purging for me. Yep. It was like, I will not do that again. Yep. Because so if I did it a little bit more punishable to myself, where my time when I was struggling with this food eating disorder, I would say I would not binge or purge if it was healthy. It was really only like bad things, air quotes, bad things, high sugar things that were very processed, things that's like, in my mind, I was like, I shouldn't eat cake, all those things. So I would allow myself to eat healthy foods, and I didn't have a problem with that, a sandwich or a salad or, certain things. But when I swore off purging, for me, I was like, okay, so if I binge again, you have to deal with the consequences because there's no easy out of that. But then what I ended up doing was like replace the purging with like an insane, stupid amount of time in the gym. Yeah. So, I was
exercise-induced anorexia.
Correct. Yeah. So I'd be like, okay, if there's this many calories in this, how long is that going to take me on the bike? Yes. That's what I started doing, which is, okay, it's not good. Maybe it's slightly better than this, but it was my way of like progressing through it. And eventually I was able to like get to healthier places where it's like, I don't have to, food's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. I can have it if I want it. It will be there today. It will be there tomorrow. I can say yes or I can say no. And that's okay. Yeah. And getting to a place of safety. Mm-hmm. But then again, so this was probably like when I was like going off to college, that I would say that I had my worst bout with this. And then there was like, I swore that off. And then eventually my relationship with food just kind of naturally, as I started to be like, hey, like this is like, at least I wasn't purging, right? So, and then I started being more productive with my training, not just about calories. And I just kind of started to have naturally take the focus a little bit off of food. Yeah. And it was great. And it eventually, and then when I went down to 125 again, that was like, so like I didn't go back into binging and purging. Well, actually, no, I did binge a little bit, but I didn't purge. But it was like, I was just like so calorie restricted that all the thoughts came right back. It literally felt like I was like 19 again. It was a relapse. It was a relapse in a way because, again, I was in a form of starving, although it was hidden under this guise of like, well, I'm doing it for sport. It's professional. I'm dedicated. I'm just diligent. I'm super, the super athlete, the super mom. Like I was a mother at this point. I'm going to make 125, a weight that I hadn't weighed since I was like, I remember my first weigh-in for wrestling in high school, like the check weight, like first day of practice. I was 130.6 pounds. Okay. 15 years old, freshman in high school. Yeah. I'm a 35-year-old woman with 2 children.
Fighting at 125. Insane.
insane. It was insane. And so because of that, it just triggered so much of that. And I was like, whoa, like this is still like I'm constantly having thoughts of going back to this right now. Like I am really having to battle this. And it was a process for me. And that's when I remember when I was like, I came up with a mantra. Luckily I was like a more healed and balanced person at that point in my life. So I think I navigated that a lot faster than I did when I was younger. It took me years when I was younger. I mean, through my wrestling career all the way up into the beginning of mixed martial arts. And I actually hit a point where I I just kind of had this like breakdown. Like I broke. Like I was like I was being like by myself a lot, so I could like binge more, and I was like excluding people out of my life. And I was just like very, and it took me about a week of being in the really dark spot where like I just called my mom up and I was like, I'm not okay. And I was just like bawling, and like I went home for a little while, and I was like, then I had to move through it, and I had to make promises to myself, and I had to try to stick to that. But anyways, fast forward years later, pretty healthy relationship with food, I would say. Yeah, it was like healing. It was good. And I was proud of myself for sure. But then again, like trying to make that weight was just like, it just was so crazy how all those like things wanted to come right back to me.
It's a form of addiction in the same way that like an alcoholic is always an alcoholic, even if they've been going to AA for 20 years, they'll say like, hey, my name's so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic, even though they haven't had a drop, because it could come back in a second. I think food is a very interesting quote unquote drug in that alcohol is devastating and it can kill you. If someone is able to stop being an alcoholic, they don't have to drink, but you've always got to fight your food. You've always got to eat. And so you're facing your demon every day, multiple times a day. It's a very unique and interesting addiction that people can really struggle with. And in the fight world, it's not spoken about very much. And I do the nutrition for a fair amount of high-level jiu-jitsu competitors. The number of them and I mean like high-level, like very well-known, they struggle with binge eating, even like right now, to this day, active competitors. But they do it because that's how their paycheck comes in. What I love is seeing high-level fighters, whatever organization, who don't cut weight and they just kill it. And one thing you'll notice, a lot of these fighters who don't cut weight is their weight doesn't balloon after a fight. Whereas the ones who do cut weight, you'll often see them, who actually speaks about it openly, so I don't feel bad name it, Patty the Batty. Like you see him gain, I think it's like 50 pounds very quickly. And he talks about it, and he'll go out and be open about how he's eating, but it's very damaging, and it's on display for people to see. But I don't think people understand the demons that you're facing when you're going through that. And I'm hoping that as time goes on, it becomes more and more talked about. The other group that this really struggles with this is the bodybuilding world. I mean, they get to such lean levels, and they're eating so little, and they're being so overly restrictive, and then doing tons of extra cardio on top of it. The binge.
It's the end of their, right? Because then they're either eating so much at first, right?
Yeah, I mean, the huge guys, yeah, they can typically eat way more than we'll call it like a woman figure competitor or something. But yeah, they're all getting down to very, very, very few calories by the end of it. But often what you'll see them do is as they're getting ready for a show, they'll be posting pictures and videos of themselves. After the show is over, you won't see them posting any pictures or videos of themselves. You'll see them posting pictures from the show. You'll see them posting pictures and videos of their prep, but you don't see anything real time because they got fucking huge until the next one comes up and they start their prep again. It's a huge problem. And there was actually a big study that came out within the last couple of years looking at eating disorders within the bodybuilding world. The vast majority, I believe it's over 90%, don't quote me, I believe it's over 90% of higher level competitors struggle with disordered eating. Phil Heath, one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, spoke about it. He spoke about it very openly about the body dysmorphia that he struggles with, and looking at this dude who's like the pinnacle of bodybuilding, 7-time, 8-time Mr. Olympia, like has body dysmorphia. If you don't think this is affecting people lower on the totem pole, you're out of your mind. It is pervasive, and going back to the original diet culture, this idea that we have good foods and bad foods is causing more of these binging and purging issues that are leading people down horrible relationships with food.
What would you say to someone who is just curious about starting to make healthy change in their life?
Doesn't have to be big. It can be very, very small, like seemingly small steps. And it depends on what they're struggling with. Like for some people, I would even just adding in more protein is such an amazing first step. For other people, I would say just write down everything you eat. I don't even need you to track calories. Just write everything you eat down. Because I'm not, what I was talking about before, this conversation around binging and purging and all that, these are typically people who are already very focused on their health and fitness. Ironically, they've taken it to one extreme. But if we look at large scale data, the vast majority of Americans are not overly focused on their health and fitness. The vast majority are severely overweight and not exercising and not eating well at all. For these people, they're just unaware of how much they're eating. They just don't know. So I'll just be like, write down for 3 days everything you eat. I don't care if it's a fucking crouton. I don't care if it's a glass of water. Just write it down, because when they see on a piece of paper everything that they ate, all of a sudden they're like, oh, I didn't realize I had all of that. And sometimes it's just making them aware, where they can be like, you know what? I was going to write down that I was going to have X, Y, and Z, but I'm not going to write that down. I'm going to just not eat, or I'll have an apple, or I'll have some almonds, or I'll have this. Just making them aware of it is enough. Adding more protein for most people is a pretty good idea. Adding more fiber is a really good idea for the vast majority of people. I think it's like 93% of Americans don't eat enough fiber, which is one of the biggest reasons why we're seeing huge rises in colorectal cancer. It's one of my biggest concerns with the carnivore community, and I pray that it doesn't happen. I don't wish cancer on anybody. You can follow whatever diet you want, but I don't want you to get sick. And I'm seeing a lot of people who are following very, very, very meat-focused diets that are not getting anywhere near enough fiber. And quite frankly, it's scary and concerning. So more fiber, more protein, fruits and vegetables you enjoy. Berries. Who doesn't like raspberries and blackberries and blueberries? They're fucking delicious. Put it on some Greek yogurt. More fiber, more protein. If you just do that, you write down your foods. I mean, and then on top of it, walk. Go for walks. Get outside. It is
like undervalued.
without question. Walking is the best. I've never, ever met anybody who didn't feel better after they went on a walk. Ever. If you go outside, I don't care if it's cold, I don't care if it's hot. If you can only go on a walking pad or a treadmill, great. But get movement in. I don't care what diet you follow. We have data from Italy and from Sweden and from Japan and from Greece and France, all over. You can have many different diets work. The one common trait among the longest living, healthiest populations is movement. And also, by the way, lower stress. They're not grinding all the time. We often put CEOs on a pedestal as like the ultimate form of success. CEOs don't live the longest. Like typically you're looking at high-powered CEOs. They're not the ones who are living to 90, 95, 100. If you look at the longest living populations, it's people that have good work-life balance, good relationship with food. I mean, even if you look at right now, there's a lot of information coming about how alcohol just isn't good in any dose. But if we look at the longest living populations in the world, it's often people who can have it in moderation. Shocking. Once again, it's like if all you're doing is grinding, working, staying up late, and you're not, like everything is just work, stress is going to be through the roof. You're probably not going to be moving as much. No one's really eating a salad at 2 a.m. Most people, when they're staying up really late, they're eating like shit. They're overly stressed. Get out and move. Just walk. It's an amazing form of exercise. More protein, more fiber, fruits and vegetables. You can't go wrong.
What are some of your favorite forms of fiber?
Number one is raspberries and blackberries. They have 8 grams of fiber per cup, which is huge. I mean, a good way to figure out how much fiber you need, you do 14 times 1,000. So about 14 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories. So not 14 times 1,000, sorry. It's 14 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories. So if you're on a 2,000 calorie diet, it's about 28 grams of fiber per day. And again, like 93% of Americans don't get enough. So if you get 8 grams in a cup of raspberries and blackberries, you're killing it. Pumpkin seeds, also an amazing form of fiber. Beans and lentils, amazing form of fiber. Avocado is actually a tremendous form of fiber. I have a lot of avocado. I should have mentioned that. Avocado is amazing as well. These are all typically very high fiber foods that also are very nutritious.
I hear you didn't say anything about like kale or spinach or anything like that. Are you
high fiber as people think? I'm not the biggest fan of kale. I think it just tastes horrible. I'm not going to
concerned about anti-nutrients or anything in that?
No, not at all. Not to say that it doesn't matter, but I'm not concerned about it. There are like, the last question I asked you on my podcast is what are you scared of? And you were like, someone taking my kids or something out of my kids. On the scale of like how fearful I am of anti-nutrients, it's just like I couldn't even see it down that list of how many fucking things I'm scared of. I'm just not worried about it at all. I think that's really most people are missing the forest for the trees. And again, I'm not saying it's not an issue for anybody, but if we're looking at large scale data, the vast majority of Americans focusing on anti-nutrients when you're eating like fucking shit all the time and you're getting 2,000 steps a day, like we've got other bigger rocks we can work on, buddy. It's just not what most people need to be focusing on. And I think most people making content about it know that it's not the biggest issue, but they're trying to stay relevant and they're trying to make content around things that people might be interested in. And they'll make scary content around a topic that really isn't going to make that big of a difference in people's health, but their algorithm rewards people who get content, engaging content. And so talking about walking usually isn't going to be the most engaging, fun, exciting content. Talking about something called anti-nutrients that someone's going to get all riled up over, that'll really push to the algorithm. So again, I'm not saying it's not a problem, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just, I'm not worried. Like, you're getting 1,500 steps a day. Like, let's fucking bump that up. Let's actually eat fruits and vegetables. Let's eat more protein. Let's get you exercising, lifting weights, sleeping enough before you start worrying about anti-nutrients.
What about intermittent fasting? Are you a fan or no?
I'm fine with it. It's I've used it. I love it when I travel. If I'm traveling or taking a flight, I'll fast for sure because I don't have to spend money at the airport and I don't have to worry about feeding myself and all that. It's a wonderful tool for certain people. I found, actually, speaking of your dad, who you said was a trucker, I've actually found it can be a wonderful tool for someone who has a job like that, or even nurses, often firefighters, even people in the military. It can be a wonderful tool because they don't have to worry about eating for long durations of time. If someone tells me, hey, I'm not hungry in the morning, then don't force yourself to eat. Great. And people will be like, I'm intermittent fasting. Let's call it, you're skipping breakfast and maybe lunch. That's what it is. Let's take out the fancy terminology and trying to sound intermittent fast. Shut the fuck up. You're skipping breakfast. It's not that big of a deal. It's a great tool depending on your lifestyle. And if you like not eating in the morning and maybe early afternoon, then don't eat. That's great. But if you are hungry in the morning, or if you have a big workout around 10 or 11 a.m., you're probably going to want to eat something before. Maybe not. If you'd prefer to work out fasted, cool, work out fasted. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's very much based on personal preference.
Yeah. No, I like that answer. I think for me, it's intermittent fasting. I think the longest fast I did was like 47 hours. It was like almost 48. And I don't feel motivated to do a long fast like that again anytime in the near future. Yeah, it was a really long fast. It was fun in the way of challenge, it was in that way, but now I would say it's like I'm like a 12 to maybe 16, just depends on the day. And that works better for me.
That fits your lifestyle and it's amazing.
Because I like to stop eating a little bit before I go to sleep. For me, yeah. I think that's best because I find that the thing that tanks my Oura Ring algorithm the most is eating close to bed.
That makes sense.
Will crush my readiness score and my sleep and my quality of sleep.
Yeah.
And so when I see that data and I was like, oh, and then I was like, I started to look it up a little bit and I was like, oh, my body's kind of working hard to digest all that food. It's not as much resources are split between that and recovery. Oh, okay. Well, maybe if I let my body finish digesting a couple hours before I go to sleep, I actually sleep better. I feel better the next day.
That's super common. And my wife is the same way. What tanks my sleep more than anything is alcohol. And what's funny is the biggest thing that has helped me stop drinking is wearing my Garmin and realizing that when I drink alcohol, even if it's a small amount, my Garmin will tell me your sleep sucked, which is crazy because they don't put it in. It's not like I'm like, hey, I had alcohol. It just knows.
Well, same thing with mine. If I've had a drink or two, I'll know it for sure.
Immediately. Even if I don't necessarily feel different, every single time I drink, it will tell me that. And that is like one of the coolest things where it's like, I'm just not going to drink as often just because I know it's going to disrupt my sleep quality. But my sleep quality improves when I have carbohydrates before bed. I get way more deep and REM sleep when I have some form of carbohydrate before bed, and I love carbs, so great. But also I typically work out at night. So I don't know if I have before. I'll have before and after. So I'll work out. I'll have carbs and protein before, carbs, protein after. and then I'll play chess until I win, and then I go to bed. And I know that if I don't eat carbs before I go to bed, I will typically get less REM and deep sleep.
Is there still space between the carbs and sleep usually?
An hour maybe, not that much.
Yeah. Okay. What else was I going to ask you about? There was like one other thing. Let me think for a second here. We had intermittent fasting. Yes, GLP-1s.
Oh yeah.
I'm super curious about this. I'm just gonna let you take it away. I'm not going to say anything yet. What do you have to think? What do you have to say about them?
So I've always said, because I've been in this industry for 20 years now, early on, I would say, listen, there's no miracle drug, but if there was, I'd take it. And I'm not saying everybody should take it. This is a decision that needs to be had between you and your medical provider. It's not for everybody, and we're still learning a lot. Granted, they've been around for a while. People say, oh, we don't know. It's like, we've been studying these things for over 20 years. Like, they've been around for a fair amount of time. They are a legitimate miracle. Again, not for everybody, and I'm not saying everyone should take it. It's a very important decision that you need to make between you and your medical provider, and maybe even get second and third opinions before you decide to do it. People will then be like, well, what about the horrible side effects? It's like, number one, name me one pharmaceutical that doesn't have potential side effects. Every single one. And like, what about the lawsuits? Find me one pharmaceutical that hasn't had lawsuits. Every single pharmaceutical has had lawsuits against it. One of the biggest ones that people are hearing about, again, fear-mongering news, is there have been some blindness cases. People get worried about blindness. Okay. So who are they approved for? Currently, they're FDA approved for weight loss and type 2 diabetes. So when you actually look at the lawsuits, I can always tell when someone has looked at the lawsuits or not. The lawsuits, a very small number of people have reported blindness after starting a GLP-1. They're all people with severe type 2 diabetes who, and by the way, what's one of the major issues with type 2 diabetes? What's one of the major things that can happen? You go blind. So now the question is, well, was it the GLP-1 that caused you to go blind, or was it your unmanaged type 2 diabetes for 10, 15, 20 years, and then it just happened to hit after you took it? There isn't anybody who has taken a GLP-1 that I've seen that has gotten blind from a GLP-1 that didn't have severe type 2 diabetes beforehand. The overwhelming amount of research is showing not only weight loss benefits and better management of type 2 diabetes, but we're seeing things that are better for addiction, for alcoholism, for smoking cessation. We're seeing cardioprotective benefits. We're seeing reduced overall inflammation, and inflammation isn't bad, but systemic inflammation chronically is a major issue. So we're seeing improved inflammatory markers. I'm on tirzepatide. I've been very open about that. I did like an experiment for 8 months where I went on it, and then I did it for a while, and I was taking my blood work the whole time, and like, I'm a very healthy dude, thank God. My cholesterol improved dramatically. My ApoB improved dramatically. And for the
I mean, again, ApoB.
ApoB is a cholesterol marker, so it's very indicative of your risk of heart issues down the road. So, and for me, like, keep in mind the major ways that you can improve ApoB are often obviously exercise, sleeping well, higher fiber intake, and of course reducing your body fat. Even me now, being at a higher body weight than I have been prior, my ApoB is the best it's ever been in my adult life, even though I've had less body fat before, which is likely as a result of the GLP-1 and the inflammation benefits, the anti-inflammatory benefits you can get from it. Again, they are not for everybody, and it is not a decision to take lightly, because realistically, they are probably a forever drug. The data is very clear that if you get on and you lose weight and then you get off, you are more than likely going to regain the weight.
Do you think that that's because people haven't made lifestyle changes?
That's a great question. I think that's a huge part of it. I think that if you look at the data, around 15 million Americans are currently on them, with over 30 million having used them in their lifetime, which is way more than people think. If you look at the data around creatine, about like 4 million Americans are using creatine. So we hear about creatine all the time and how many people are using it. It's like, you think a lot of people are on creatine. Wait till you find out how many people are using GLP-1s. They're just not telling you because you think they're gonna be judged for it. The number of people who messaged me after my experiment, they were like, I'm on it. I'm not telling my spouse. I'm not telling my husband. I'm not telling my wife. I'm not telling my friends because I feel like I'm going to be judged for it. So many people are on, and I would bet, I'm wagering that within 10 years, I think a majority, not everyone, but a majority of Americans are going to be on it. especially as patents expire and as costs go down, they become more affordable and more accessible. I think we're going to see a huge number of people getting on them because, again, right now they're FDA approved for weight loss and type 2 diabetes, but over the long term, we're going to see them being approved for, again, cardioprotective benefits. We're going to see them being approved for binge eating disorder. We're going to see them being approved for, I think, addiction issues that people have. It's pretty intense. So I can't definitively say this is why, but what we do see very clearly is that with people with smoking, drinking, and even with gambling, it is reducing their addictive behaviors. And again, I don't know the mechanisms by which this is happening, but I would imagine that it is. Trying to think about the best way to phrase this. I would imagine that it's reducing the impulse. It's reducing like, for example, I'll walk you through when I first started the GLP-1. If you looked at a heat map of me and my house before I started the GLP-1, you'd see where I would go to the pantry and when I would just grab it, even if I'm not hungry, I'm just going to fucking eat. And you'd see the heat map of where I'd go to the fridge, go to the pantry, whatever. After I got on the GLP-1, you looked at the heat map would look the same. It would look the exact same, but the difference is I'd open up the pantry and I'd be like, never mind, and I'd close it. And I was taking the same route because that was the habit that was ingrained, but when it actually came to the impulse of grabbing the food, I just was like, I don't need it. It wasn't even because I wasn't hungry. It was just like I had a moment of, do I really want this? Whereas before that impulse to action was
dampen the reward centers maybe a little bit, like just kind of like, like, it just doesn't seem like it'd be as rewarding as.
It very well might. Yeah. I mean, again, I can't say for certain, but it absolutely might reduce or diminish that rewards, but I can't say for certain. I'm not sure.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you start taking a GLP-1, they typically recommend that you work out with it.
You have to. It's unbelievably important. Okay. And it's a major issue when they're not.
Right. And that's just I think the last thing is we're getting to the closing point, but you obviously still work out, so you haven't noticed any loss of muscle mass or anything like that, correct?
Strength. And I actually have a number of clients and Inner Circle members who are on them, a significant amount. They've actually joined because I'm one of the few coaches who are accepting of people who are on them, whereas a lot of coaches are bashing people. And so they'll come to me because I'm not just saying you're lazy and weak if you do this. I think they're a wonderful tool for the right people in the right circumstance. But I have data from members who are continuing to strength train while they're on it. And they're not only not losing muscle, they're building muscle and building bone density. They're actually adding bone, which if you're not strength training and you're not doing some plyometrics and you're not eating enough protein, then odds are you will lose muscle tissue, you will lose bone density, which is a big fucking problem. But this isn't specific to GLP-1s. This is specific to extreme caloric restriction without strength training. And GLP-1s can make it easier to be in a caloric deficit, which is why people are losing. It's not magic. It's just they're often reducing hunger and they're causing you to eat less as a result of it, which means you're in a calorie deficit. Calorie deficit is another term for energy deficit. You're not giving your body enough energy. It's the only way you can lose body fat. So if someone isn't strength training and they're not eating enough protein and they're eating in an energy deficit, well, they're going to be losing muscle regardless of whether or not they're on a GLP-1 or not. And the people who are taking GLP-1s as of right now are mostly people who are probably not strength training to begin with, but they have a major health crisis. They have excess body fat to a huge degree. They're suffering type 2 diabetes as a result of it, major health issues. So they need to lose body fat immediately. But if they're not also strength training, then they're going to start losing muscle, lean mass, and also bone as well, which is horrific long term. But if we're looking at the lesser of two evils, they're way overly fat at this point. So we need to get them to a healthy fat as quickly as possible. Ideally, they strength train at the same time and eat enough protein. What I'm seeing is among people who are still strength training and still eating enough protein, and also, by the way, they're not starving themselves. They're not eating so little. Oftentimes they might have to force feed a little bit. They're building muscle and they're building bone. But it's not like GLP-1s cause muscle loss or GLP-1s cause bone loss. It's only if you're not strength training and not eating enough protein as well.
Interesting. No, I appreciate that take on it. I've been very curious your thoughts on it. I know you've been pretty open about it, so I appreciate you sharing it with the audience. And I think I share your sentiment with it. I think my only caveat, as you know, non-judgmental either. By the way, like my cousin who I'll be visiting, like she's on GLP-1, and I was like, you know what? I think that's good for you. Like, I'm really glad for you because it's been a struggle for her. And I think that stress is one of the things that makes people the sickest.
Without question.
Without question. So I'm like, you know what? Thanks for telling me. And like, that's probably a good decision for you. And I'm happy for her. But the thing I worry about a little bit is that sometimes people if you don't make the changes that you're talking about, then sometimes it's like, if it's not a heavy lift, if it's not like hard to do, it's not as rewarding. It's kind of like giving away your service for free. It could be like the most beneficial thing forever, but like, I'm just making a comparison, but like if you just offered everything that you do entirely for free, just people wouldn't value it as much. Right. And so sometimes like when it's a lighter lift, if the changes aren't made, if it wasn't a little bit difficult to do and you didn't feel like the reward of it, then potentially that's the downside.
Because it makes it easier?
Because it makes it easier to do without doing the things, sometimes without doing the things that you would typically have to do in order to do it, which the hard things sometimes in life, at least for me, the difficult things, like those struggles for me when I was like in those really dark moments and I pulled myself out of it, I could like legitimately be like, fucking bravo, Miesha. Like you worked your ass off to do that. And it felt really good. And I felt accomplished for it. And I also feel like it's a skill set that I gained that will help carry me in the rest of my life and all of the decisions that I make in the future, and kind of like weighing that in. So I think for the other side of it, that could be like the maybe potentially like mental downfall is like that it's an easier lift. It's like trying to put on muscle with a super light weight, sometimes.
It's a valid point. And it's like, what I would say is, if I have someone who's struggling with really bad anxiety, and we all struggle differently, right? Like, and this is one thing people don't understand. Everyone just assumes however they are is how everyone else is. Hunger is highly individual, and how hungry someone is varies not only just based on genetics, but also your environment, what you were brought up in. It's not just based on everyone is the same level of hunger. So we have genetic predispositions to hunger levels. If I had someone who really struggled with chronic anxiety and they started taking an anxiety medication to help calm them and to help them function better and be a better mom, be a better dad, have a less stressful life, I'm not going to be like, it would be better is if you didn't take that medication, because it would be harder and you'd be more rewarded if you didn't take this medication. Or someone who's struggling with ADHD. It's like they start taking Adderall or another ADHD medication, and all of a sudden they start improving. Their symptoms improve, and they can feel better and be more productive, and also they just feel more in control. I'm not going to say, you shouldn't take this medication, because doing the hard thing is going to help you, is going to be more rewarding. For me, I know some people are just anti-pharmaceuticals altogether. Typically what I've found is the people who are very anti-pharmaceutical are I think that you should have a healthy level of criticism for everything, and you should be cautious of everything for sure. And obviously, big pharma is not all good. They've done some really bad things. But if we look at the preponderance of what pharmaceuticals have done, it's actually like pretty extraordinary, the things that we've been able to accomplish with pharmaceuticals. I'm not going to tell someone you shouldn't take this simply because it would be rewarding to do it without it, especially if right now they are severely struggling, and taking that thing can improve their quality of life, the longevity of their life, and make them a better individual. So I think obesity is really interesting that there's so much stigma around it, whereas like we would never, the stigma around ADHD is pretty small. Or anxiety, I think, is even more stigmatized than ADHD, but anxiety less than obesity. But I don't know anyone who's going around being like, anyone taking anxiety medication is cheating. I don't know anyone who would do that. It's like, anxiety medication isn't cheating. It doesn't mean that you still don't have to do hard work to improve. But for some reason with GLP-1s and with anything obesity, all of a sudden people are like, oh, they're cheating. And what? This isn't a fucking competition. The only time I could see that being cheating is if you're doing a bodybuilding show or something and they made it, we don't want GLP-1s involved. Well, in that case, they shouldn't make fucking testosterone allowed either, in which case they have drug tested versus undrug tested. I would understand if bodybuilding shows were like part of the drug test is going to be to see if you're using a GLP-1 agonist, in which case I think that would be fair. I don't think it would be fair to someone to say they're natural and then taking a GLP-1 to reduce the hunger during the bodybuilding prep. I think that if you're going to be doing bodybuilding, and I wouldn't be surprised if down the road we see bodybuilding federations checking for that. And there are real side effects as a result of GLP-1s. They are real and they can be debilitating depending on the individual, whether it's stomach distress but oftentimes with the major side effects, it's usually coming from doing them inappropriately, taking large quantities, not getting it from a reputable source. There are many, many issues with it. But even if you do it from a reputable source, even if you take an appropriate quantity, there are real side effects that exist, and it's not a decision to take lightly. But the idea of I don't think that people should do it because it's cheating or because it's not going to be as rewarding, I don't think applies to any other pharmaceutical or any other health issue that people have.
So it's interesting, but I do apply that in other ways too. And it's not like, I don't want to sound like a jerk about it, but I just want to be totally honest. This is the only other caveat that I think about that I think was like worth exploring. Right. But I think like for people, with ADD or ADHD, I also think like, well, I think that like if a kid is diagnosed with it and he's in school, I'm like, well, is the problem the kid or is it the school? Is it in the environment?
I don't think kids should be given that medication.
Because I don't think that I look at ADD or ADHD and I don't look at it as a disability.
I agree.
I think it was probably meant to serve a purpose that the environment doesn't suit. Right. So I think sometimes prescribing it like prematurely or without like a lot of thought, but I know that there are people that also use it right and use it and it does benefit them and it does help them in circumstances. However, I have this like root cause mentality. Like, can we help people at a younger age or can we give people a better skill set? It's part of the reason why when I started homeschool is like, could we like teach breath work in school? Can we teach like how to like help kids navigate? Like, can we help? Can we actually like help them so that when they're feeling this way and they're having trouble focusing, maybe a skill set would be like, you know what? I'm going to go outside and I'm going to go for like a 30-minute jog and I'm going to try to reset and let's see if that works. Right? Let's just see if we could actually help them be productive without the medication first. And then if we need the medication or if the current status of where someone is far worse than like what any potential downside would be, that's the time. I just hate jumping the gun, so to speak.
I agree. I think it should be the last resort. Right. And I actually think that I battle with it. I think in an ideal world, someone wouldn't use these until they have their exercise in check, their nutrition in check. They are getting enough protein. They are strength training several days a week. But then also like, okay, well, this person has severe type 2 diabetes. They're like at risk of getting a foot chopped off, whatever it is. Like, okay, we just need to do whatever to save you now. But I think medication should always, let's look at what you can control first and your actions first, as opposed to just jumping straight to a pharmaceutical. I think I completely agree. I also think that way too many children are prescribed ADHD medication, which I've spoken about pretty ferociously. I have many friends because I was diagnosed with ADD as a kid, and thank God my mom was like, I'm not putting him on these fucking drugs. Like, I don't want him to be on these drugs. And I have very close friends who struggle their entire adult life because they were put on these drugs as kids, and now they feel like they can't be productive if they don't take them. They feel like if they don't take it, then all of a sudden they're bad, they're less than, they feel like they're dependent on these drugs to be any form of productive.
Robbed of the opportunity of learning how to navigate it without that as a child growing up.
So I'm fully in agreement with you on that. I guess I'm hedging against the people who are so quick to be like, no one should be taking them. Good luck with all the health. It's just there's a middle ground here where it's like, and what I'll say, and again, I was like, there's no magic pill, and I still don't think it's a magic pill, but I do think they're a miracle. I think they're a miracle, and I think what we are going to be seeing over the next 10 years is going to change a lot of people's minds. Even Dr. Peter Attia, who first came out pretty against them, and recently he's changed his stance, being like, yep, they're actually pretty amazing. We're looking at the cardioprotective benefits of it. We're looking at this. Like, it's been very cool to see the science-minded people, as the data comes out, be like, oh, there's a lot to these that we didn't realize before. And he was one of the ones early on being like, you're actually losing a lot of muscle, and now he's like, oh, wait, if you strength train and if you eat enough protein, all of a sudden you can actually build muscle and build bone and improve your health while doing it. Of course, the issue is when people are using them inappropriately. Shocker. That's the problem.
I don't think there's a better place to close. So, no, thank you for that. I mean, it was great insight, and that's exactly what I wanted to hear. And I love changing my mind on things with new information. I love it. So, not that I had a hard stance on them either way, but those were just like my little caveats of like concern and like, how do we help people get the most and the best? And like, let's not overprescribe. Let's not underprescribe. Let's try to help people be their best given individual circumstance.
Agreed. And they're valid thoughts, and I appreciate the conversation.
So cool. Thank you so much, Jordan.
Thank you.